Shri Chaitanya Manupastamstane Namaste Saraswati Deve Govani Pachayane Nivashisha Shunyavadi Pasatari Satarine Vanchagopa Trubhasha Kripa Sinuevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Welcome everybody to the second part of day number 2. So we have some part of our morning discussion to finish, and I hope we will find enough time to also start actually the third lesson, because the third lesson is very long. I usually never manage to cover all the topics, so I usually take some of the third lesson in the second one, and then sometimes I have to finish the third lesson the day after. So let us see how far we get. Just a couple of little additional comments I would like to make about this morning's discussion on Garbhadhan Samskara and conceiving a child. There are so many more details. You know, when to conceive, when not to conceive. Oh my God. I mean, my mood and approach is to keep it a little more simple, you know, because if you make it too complicated, then I feel it discourages devotees to try at all to move towards this whole thing of Garbhadhan Samskara. But I remember I was once speaking to one devotee, and he was jokingly saying, if you really consider all the different rules and regulations when you should conceive and when you shouldn't conceive, you may face the fact that you find only one day a year. So, I mean, yeah, no, not my mood, I'm sorry, you know. But there is a few little things which I just quickly want to add, you know. So there is a rule, for example, that one should not conceive on Ekadashi, and not on full moon, and not on new moon. And also one should conceive after sunset, but before midnight. So not during the day. And also not during sunset. I think it came in the discussion with Diti and Kasyapa Muni that, you know, during sunset there's all kinds of ghosts or entities actively performing their pastimes. So, yeah, they may create some disturbance or whatever. So not during sunset. And then one can consider astrological points too, but it's my personal approach maybe, that I would rather look at things like, for example, Rahu period. The Rahu period can be a rather turbulent and almost a little crazy time. But Rahu also, there's so many other aspects, how the other planets, you know, are. Some Rahu periods are not that bad at all, but some Rahu periods are really turbulent times where people have all kinds of inclinations for sinful activities, drugs, you know, illicit sex drive, and so many astrologers recommend that the Rahu period, if it is a heavy Rahu period, not a good time to conceive a child, then you're going to have some Rahu kid there, you know, which is also all kind of, little crazy Rahu kid. I know some devotees who have a bit of a Rahu kid, you know, conceived in Rahu time. So, yeah, this I think is worthwhile checking out, just the general favorable periods, you know. Or I know one devotee, she conceived a child in an unfavorable condition and the child is severely handicapped. But she didn't know this. And only afterwards she had an astrologer telling her that, yeah, for 2 or 3 years or something, she has a very bad time there, which shows clearly that the child can be severely damaged or die or whatever, you know. So these things, I think, may be helpful. But, yeah, I mean, it's up to each and every devotee individually how much they want to put emphasis on all kinds of other considerations, or whether we just want to also rely a little bit on Krishna, that he gives us what we need for our purification, and so on, you know. Also, we can remember that many of these rules and aspects actually traditionally they were also followed by people who were not Vaishnavas, you know. It was a general regulation and recommendation. But then as devotees, you know, we also have more Krishna's mercy and arrangement in our picture, which people who are not following, you know, devotional life and following strictly the principles and so on, they're more under the general rules of karma and all kinds of other considerations and so on, you know. So in any case, I simply wanted to add this to the morning's discussion because we didn't have the time to address these things. So now I would like to turn to the last part of the second lesson, where we talk about the creating of the good environment for raising children, because this is part of the preparatory phase, you know, that we should not only, you know, consider the actual Garbhadan Samskara, what we are discussed this morning, that apart from 50 rounds, we can add so many other things to really shape up, you know, our health-wise and also spiritually and so on. But another really important consideration is that before we should actually consider conceiving a child, all the, you know, the atmosphere and all the environment should be right. You know, there should be a good nest, so to speak, so that really everything is very nicely arranged so a soul can take birth in our family. And we can understand by creating such environment beforehand, that actually moves the child into the center, you know, isn't it? If we actually carefully consider how we have to mold our life so the whole arrangement and environment is very nice and conducive as best as possible for a living entity to take birth and start their spiritual journey, you know, the more we make that as an important point, obviously that moves the whole topic of children really in the center of our family life, right? But if we don't give much attention to this, then obviously that topic of children is not the center, right? And at the same time, we will discover that when we take this point seriously of really creating the ideal, as much as possible, ideal environment to bring up a child, that actually means we also mold our family life into an ashram. Yes, because, you know, we take this point seriously, this whole responsibility that now we are inviting a soul and we want to make it all worthwhile, so that this soul gets the best start on the journey back home, back to Godhead. So that means we will make all attempts and endeavors to actually make sure our family life is an ashram. And ashram means holy name, Srimad Bhagavatam, should be the center of our family life. Otherwise, we cannot really call it an ashram. It's somewhere in between something, But ashram always means Bhagavatam, holy name, is the center. Yes. So let us look at the list of little points here, which I collected. So let us first of all understand children are prone to be misled and misguided very easily because, their character and personality, it's not really formed yet, and so many influences can contribute that the child somehow develops him or herself in not such a spiritually favorable direction. So a child is very prone to be misled. We can compare the situation of a young child. It's like a tender creeper in the garden. When we plant something, some little creeper comes out there, right? So it needs constant attention, supervision and care, constantly, here our Chigabanga Prabhu knows, if you want to grow something in the garden, it's not just a matter of throwing the seeds there and then you go on a holiday for 6 weeks or something. No, you have to give constant attention, constant care, constant service, and supervision. So in preparation for inviting a soul into our family, there is the importance of creating a spiritual and nourishing environment in the home. That it is really perfect for developing Krishna consciousness. So, I was also contemplating, especially in a community like this here, rural community where people live close to the temple. This is just so much easier to create a nice environment, because also it's so much easier to actually make your family life into an ashram. So much easier, because a few times a week, if not every day, but a few times, anybody who wants can come to some part at least of the morning program, and we have association, we can take guidance from more experienced devotees, and we can actually do some service also, be somehow connected and take prasadam together. This is just no comparison to living in a big city and having to travel 45 minutes to the temple, and it's a whole different story, So in such a condition here, it is so much easier, It's actually excellent, we can say, really, to bring up children, So in the home, there should be a strong culture of sadhana, Shravanam Kirtanam, as foundation to raising children. This is very, very important, because, yesterday, there was a question on internet, online, which we didn't discuss. But then afterwards I heard the question was how to inspire children in chanting japa. Well, we will get to this, but it is all a matter of creating a culture of chanting in the home. If we don't have the taste and we don't have that culture of taking our chanting seriously, how can we inspire a child? It's all about we having to set the example. The parents have to teach by example. Then it becomes very natural, So child raising is not just a matter of getting a few tips and tools and tricks how to get the child to practice Krishna consciousness. No, we have to teach by our personal example. If we are nicely practicing and happy devotees, we have a taste, it's very natural for us to lead this kind of lifestyle. Of course the children will tune in and follow, of course they will, good likelihood anyway. So, but that all should be considered before. We should understand, okay, if we really want, to invite a special soul into our family and we want to give the best start to this person in Krishna consciousness, we have to create the best environment. And one of the main and foremost parts of this is the culture of sadhana. Very clear, we can only nourish others if we are nourished ourselves, So we can only give Krishna to the children as much as we have Krishna ourselves. We can't give something which we don't have, very clear. So the more we work on ourselves, that we have some genuine attraction and taste and also discipline in our lives, the more the children will grow up in that environment and atmosphere. In order to become good parents, we have to be willing to learn, to listen and to love. We have to learn from the children what works, what doesn't work. Every child is very individual. We can't just have, one strategy fits every child or something. One has to constantly learn and experiment in a prayerful mood. So, the parents have to be keen to learn and to hear the child and adjust and learn. Another really important point is there has to be a harmonious relationship between the parents. This is really important. Sometimes people think, they can fix their marriage problems by having a child or something, but not sure if that works, So the relationship has to be harmonious. Things have to be settled and peaceful, but there should never be any arguments in front of the child, in the presence of the child. This is so disheartening, but these things are going on, that parents scream at each other and argue in the presence of the child. This is terrible, completely terrible, It creates insecurities and traumatic experiences, The child should never have to take sides, because this is the horrible thing we put a child in. When, mother and father argue, the child has to take sides. And this is very painful and traumatic. And, because naturally the child loves both, and having to take sides, this is awful, Yes. So we should never, argue in the presence of the children. Arguments create insecurities and traumatic experiences. Yes. Children of stable families will be emotionally secure. Children of stable families will be emotionally secure, and they respect the parents. And they accept them as role models, But if there's a lot of tension between father and mother, actually the children will disrespect the parents. Yes. Here in the next point, divorce, if divorce happens, I mean, this, especially when the children are small, this is so painful, such a traumatic experience for the children. And actually it creates a culture of disrespect towards the parents. The children become rebellious, and they have fear of being abandoned, you know. So this, and very often then children, you know, they grow up with such traumatic experiences, and then they pass this on in their family life, because this is what they know, you know, that the parents argue and that they separate. So then very often same thing happens in their family life. And then from generation to generation we pass on these things, you know. So, and this is what's happening in the modern days, you know. People come from very dysfunctional homes and families, and this luggage people carry with them, and it is a great disturbance also in spiritual life, you know. So this means, in order really to avoid this whole divorce topic, parents have to give up their own egos and preferences for the welfare of their children, you know. They just have to give up their ego battles there, just for the sake of having a harmonious atmosphere in the family. That willingness has to be there. That, all right, for the sake of my children, I'm willing to do everything. I'm willing to adjust. I'm willing to, you know, give in and give up my preferences, my interests, and my selfishness, my false ego, for the sake of, you know, having harmony, you know. Yes. Also, very clear, parents pass on to the children their way of communication, their way of resolving conflicts. You know, that's what the children learn. All these social abilities, how to resolve conflicts, how to communicate. The parents teach all these things to the children, you know. So we better are mindful of this, that we try and improve, you know, our relationship with our spouse as much as possible, you know, and we learn to clearly, in a harmonious way, communicate and resolve conflicts and so on, you know. This should ideally be all a part of the preparation, you know, so that everything is nicely arranged, you know. But if there's all kinds of tension and issues and, you know, arguments constantly, not a good time to have a child, you know. Let's first work through all these issues and things, you know, and make things harmonious, you know. Also, parents should take guidance of more experienced parents. Very important thing, you know. Having a mentor, having a coach. Any relationship problem can be solved and worked out if we are willing to take guidance and advice from somebody who has more experience in facing the challenge, you know. Yes, any conflict can be resolved. But if we think, how can I tell anybody, and otherwise everybody will know in the community. Now, of course, there has to be confidentiality. A mentor, a coach has to be able to keep things confidential so that people can open their heart, you know. But we should understand that the problems we are facing in our family life, they're not so personal issues that only I face. They're usually issues that everybody faces. They're issues of life in the material world, you know. So we cannot be too, you know, secretive about our challenges, because simply challenges of being in the material world, and everybody faces the similar challenges in one way or another. So, it's like having a disease, Sometimes people are so shy and secretive about their disease that they don't even want to go to the doctor or something, I mean, it's a little foolish, So better to just go to the doctor and explain, even though the disease may involve some embarrassment, some certain parts of the body which you don't want to show or whatever. But I mean, my God, better just to go to the doctor and clarify the thing and get the medicine. And same thing is really also with some personal issues. All right, there may be some embarrassment and this and that, but if we just treat it as a disease and we want to get the remedy here before it gets too late, before the whole disease is too progressed that you can't even cure it anymore. So better just to address things and take the advice and take the medicine, So, of course, parenting is most effective in partnership, Single parent, not a good situation, Yes. So most effective in partnership. It's more relaxed, more joyful for the parents and also for the children. And I mean, tomorrow we will get more into the role of the mother and the role of the father. And we will see that there are definitely differences, even though also the roles may overlap a little bit, but there are different moods of the father and the mother. They're not exchangeable, And it's important that a child gets both moods and not only one, So the father has to play his role as the father and the mother has to play her role as the mother. Not that both parents play the role of the mother or both parents play the role of the father. No, the child needs both moods. And we will see how actually bringing up devotees in Krishna consciousness, we will find very similar principles as than raising children. The principles are very much the same, because, when devotees come to Krishna consciousness, they're also like children, when newcomers are coming. So the principles are very, very similar, like Bhakti program, actually. So we have a little Bhakti program there in the house and the family. Yes. Very clear, if both parents, take part in the parenting, the children are more cooperative and they're more inspired. And the parents have to work together on this, If one parent goes this way and the other parent goes that way, then also not a good thing, So we'll come to this later. Another important point is don't neglect the partner over the children. This can sometimes happen, that the mother is so preoccupied with the child that she forgets the husband. And the husband feels neglected. And also all the emotional satisfaction the mother gets now with the child, So the husband is kind of left out of the picture a little bit. So, one has to be careful to avoid this, Because especially in the beginning stage as a newborn baby, the men, for them it is naturally more difficult to get a connection to a baby, than for the mother, because the mother has carried the baby around for 9 months, and has given birth, the whole, austerity of giving birth. That gives a strong connection, I remember my mother telling me, like, we were 3 children, and my brother is the youngest. He was born through a cesarean, cutting open. Not the natural way of giving birth. And my mother said, it's a difference in the relationship to the child. If you give naturally birth, you have a much stronger connection to the child. But if you just put in anesthesia and you wake up and, okay, now there's a baby there, it's a whole different story, you know. And this is also often advised now to, just give cesarean, it's easier, less painful, quicker. And in India, it's a big thing. They hardly even allow the ladies to give natural birth because it gives more money to make a cesarean. Yeah, it's a big thing, you know. Yes. So, as far as possible, we should give birth naturally, you know. So it's very natural that for mother, she has such a stronger connection to the child, so much more than the father. It's logical, cannot be denied, you know. Yes. Yes. I mean, this whole idea that now in the modern days here, you know, the father can stay at home and get the paternal payment there or whatever people call it, I don't know, you know. And the mother goes and works. This is madness, you know. This is madness. How can the father care for a newborn baby, you know? It's not possible. And I remember once when I gave this course in Mayapur, I was making this joking comment, yes, unfortunately the man cannot breastfeed, you know. And then one devotee from America, he was saying, Mataji, in America, you can buy some devices that the men strap around their chest. No, it's seriously. And they fill in milk somewhere and then the men are breastfeeding, you know. It's serious. Yes, yes. And I didn't believe it. And then somebody sent me a link where you can see it on internet and you can order it, you know. I mean, this is America. I don't know if this is on the market in Germany also. I doubt it a little bit. But America always comes up with all kinds of amazing things, you know. Husband-wife relationship is primary and impacts the relationship between parent and children. You know, so the husband-wife relationship has to be very strong, very healthy, you know, harmonious, and it's the primary relationship within the family is the husband and wife relationship, and the affection and care between husband and wife that filters down through the whole family and affects the whole family and the children, you know. Actually, same thing is in a community too, you know. The relationships between the senior devotees, they're like the parents there, sort of, you know. So if there's good and affectionate and strong and trusting relationships amongst the leaders, that filters down through the whole family, you know. And for young devotees, also very, very bad to see how senior devotees are arguing and fighting and disagreeing. It destroys the trust of young devotees, just as well as the children in the family, if they see the devotees arguing, as the parents are arguing, you know. So the principles are really so similar, you know. And of course, simple living, high thinking is a very good environment for raising children. And we also have this here so nicely in Simachalam, you know. I mean, really, it's a perfect environment to bring up children, you know. Very nice. Let us read these last few quotes which I have on the materials, and then we can briefly see whether there's any questions. So in Canto 1, 12th chapter, verse 30, Prabhupada says, Srila Jiva Goswami remarks in this connection that every child, if given an impression of the Lord from his very childhood, certainly becomes a great devotee of the Lord, like Maharaj Pariksit. One may not be as fortunate as Marge Perickett to have the opportunity to see the Lord in the womb of his mother. But even if he is not so fortunate, he can be made so if the parents of the child desire him to be so. There's a practical example in my personal life in this connection. My father was a pure devotee of the Lord, and when I was only 4 or 5 years old, my father gave me a couple of forms of Radha and Krishna. In a playful manner, I used to worship these deities along with my sister, and I used to imitate the performances of a neighboring temple of Radha Govinda. By constantly visiting this neighboring temple and copying the ceremonies in connection with my own deities of play, I developed a natural affinity for the Lord. My father used to observe all the ceremonies befitting my position. Later on, these activities were suspended due to my association in the schools and colleges, and I became completely out of practice. Prabhupada says. But in my youthful days, when I met my spiritual master, I revived my old habit, and the same playful deities became my worshipful deities in proper regulation. This was followed up until I left the family connection, and I'm pleased that my generous father gave the first impression, which was developed later into regulative devotional service by his divine grace. Marge Pollard also advised that such impressions of a godly relation must be impregnated from the beginning of childhood. Otherwise, one may miss the opportunity of the human form of life, which is very valuable, although it is temporary like others. So very nice how Prabhupada puts his personal childhood experience in the Bhagavatam, in the commentary. Very nice. There's also a letter to Satyabhama Dasi, 1973. Why should the parents not feel attachment for their children? That is natural. But our affection is not simply sentimental. We offer our children the highest opportunity to become trained up in Krishna consciousness very early, so as to assure their success in this life to go back to Godhead, for sure. That is real affection. To make sure my child gets back to Godhead, that is my real responsibility as a parent. So in other words, parents' affection, means to give faith and enthusiasm to the child to practice Krishna consciousness. It's not just sentimental affection, but we demonstrate our love, our affection for the child, that we really do everything to bring out the attraction for the child to Krishna. And a very famous letter to Arundhati in 72. I am simply surprised that you want to give up your child to some other person, even they are also devotees. For you, child worship is more important than deity worship. It's a famous letter. If you cannot spend time with him, then stop the duties of pujari. At least you must take good care of your son until he is 4 years old. And if after that time you are unable anymore to take care of him, then I shall take care. Prabhupada says. These children are given to us by Krishna. They are Vaishnavas, and we must be very careful to protect them. These are not ordinary children. They are Vaikuntha children. And we are very fortunate we can give them the chance to advance further in Krishna consciousness. That is very great responsibility. Do not neglect it or be confused. Your duty is very clear. Prabhupada speaks very strongly, Yes, I mean, we don't know whether this mother wanted to give up her child just, in some babysitting way, or whether she actually wanted to give up the child to somebody else or something. We don't know the whole situation, But yeah, this point of child worship is more important than deity worship, and at least until the child is 4. Yeah, 4 is still pretty young. 5, 6, the mother should give the undivided attention really to the child, yes. And of course here this term, this letter is really famous in ISKCON, so many people know it, but here this term of Vaikuntha children, at least the way I understand it, please don't chant in the class. This is, we can only do one thing, either chanting or attending a class. It's not such a good practice. In any case, Vaikuntha children, at least to my understanding, doesn't mean that the children come from Vaikuntha. That's not what Prabhupada is saying here, So according to my humble understanding, it simply means they're special children, and in other connections, Prabhupada says they continue from previous life, but it doesn't mean that they come from Vaikuntha, so we should not misunderstand this, But he simply calls them Vaikuntha children because they are very, very special. They're little Vaishnavas, Yes, especially if we undergo, this endeavor of really creating the perfect environment in Garbhadan Samskara, inviting a child and in a prayerful mood, preparing and, So then definitely they're very special souls, Okay, so let me see if just about this section, or let's say the whole day section of Garbhadan Samskara, creating the best environment and so on. Do we have any questions on this? One minute. Let him have the mic, so also the online audience can hear the question.
We read this quote about breastfeeding, that the consciousness of the mother goes to the child by mother's milk. Then what about this? What about a nurse? Nurse is even considered one of the 7 mothers.
Yes, obviously, she also gives the consciousness to the child. Obviously, Obviously. Here in the Western world, we don't really have other ladies breastfeeding a child, isn't it? This whole breastfeeding thing becomes so out of fashion almost in the West, That many women, many mothers, they don't breastfeed at all. They don't want to be troubled by this and all that. So this is more like something from previous times, where people had a nurse who was feeding the kids,
Queen or somebody.
Huh?
The queen or somebody.
Yes, the queen. Yeah, but obviously, yeah, same thing. If the nurse is not in good consciousness, then we better be careful whether we want to allow that woman to breastfeed the child, Yes. Any other points?
Hare Krishna. Just a comment. I don't know if it's a typo for the Soshayanti samskara because it says performed in the 10th month on page 5. But more a comment that because I have a Pujari husband, possibly, I don't know.
Yeah, we talked about that this morning.
Yeah, okay. So.
Yeah, I mean, I got this information from the book Art of Parenting, but I'm not so expert in these things, so I don't know, you know. And we didn't go too much into the whole topic of samskara because, you know, I was saying to your husband that actually if somebody is interested in getting more deeply into that, it would be best if he can offer a separate seminar. Because to get too much into details now in this seminar is really not the right thing. So I would not want to take up some deeper discussion now.
No, it's not a deeper discussion, just that it was very useful, the samskaras, just to clarify this point that I had. We went through lots of samskaras, and I was thinking, and there was one particular just short experience that the baby was in a position where they thought they would have to do cesarean section. Then we did a samskara, and I immediately had to lie down. The baby moved positions, and everything was fine. So it was really that they have such a powerful impact.
Yes, your husband was actually sharing this morning, the same story. Okay. Anything else?
I'm just wondering, with the children that come from broken homes or divorced families, how do they resolve this trauma before they're starting their own family, and so that they don't pass on these same patterns to them?
Well, they just have to do some internal work, you know. It's kind of a little off the topic because, I cannot give so much attention to how to solve all kinds of unwanted Kali Yuga situations, but I rather like to focus on how to avoid them and how to, you know, cultivate the mood so we get closer to Krishna's arrangement and so on, you know. But that's an individual thing. I mean, you know, I usually also recommend this to people when they want to get married already, that I advise them to try and work out all kinds of issues and luggage they're carrying, to try and resolve these things as much as possible before they even enter a relationship. Because if they're not solved, you know, that will burden a relationship immensely. And we may need some professional help with this, you know, some therapists and so on. I mean, a lot of things are cleared off simply by serious practice, you know, because Krishna consciousness is targeting the subtle body completely. Mind, intelligence, thoughts, ego. The whole devotional process targets the subtle body. So many things, they clear up just through serious practice. But then other things may not clear up. It's like when the body is sick, the gross body. So many things, they're healed just by time going by and by resting and taking diet and so on. But then sometimes we have to go to the doctor and take some medicines. So, and do some therapy. So same thing is there with the subtle body also. If the subtle body is too diseased, so we may have to take professional help, you know. And this should not be underestimated, this importance really, because naturally it affects the marriage relationship, it affects our ability to serve as parents and so on, you know. So it's good to be clear in this, that we may need some professional help, you know. Yes. Any other thing? Before we move on to the beginning of the next session, I do want to do this little sharing exercise at this point, that you turn to your neighbor and you share with each other, because I find this sharing one more time makes it clearer in the mind what we are taking out of the session, you know. So please try just in 2 minutes to share with each other what this day today gave you, you know, this whole second lesson of the samskaras and creating the right environment to receive a child and so on. So just 2 minutes, quickly share with each other. That helps to reflect, so you take something out of the session. Okay, Guru Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Okay, let's finish our sharing and let's start with lesson 3, just for another 25 minutes or so. So the topic of this third lesson now, to begin with, is how parents should treat the child. So we will have a few general points, and then we get to a little chart where we, hear about the different phases of a child in childhood, different phases, what the psychology of the child is, and what the child basically needs. And then most likely tomorrow we will briefly touch more detailed at these different phases, although we will also not get too much into detail because some of these aspects will be more unpacked later on. Right? So that's basically what awaits us in the third lesson. And then there will also be a section of role of the mother and role of the father. So it's quite a bigger section here. So let us have a look here. Just as gardening is a science and requires knowledge, awareness, observation, and application, really, as we said before, it's really like gardening, really like growing a plant, So in the same way, parenting is a great responsibility, most important duty we can imagine. And really, if we neglect this duty, we can set so much damage, We can really damage a person's life completely, The parent's love has to be given intelligently, with awareness and knowledge, according to the need of the child. As we said already, it is highly individualized. It's not, one size fits everyone or something, Very individual thing, And we have to admit, so far, there has not been much training given. And I'm just making some humble little attempt here, It's not that this is the perfection here, what I'm giving, but I'm just simply trying to give something. First of all, a Krishna conscious vision is that it is not my child, but Krishna's child. Yes. Not so easy to have this vision, because naturally, as we said, extended false ego, my husband, my wife, my child. But the more we solidly practice Krishna consciousness, the more we have that spiritual vision that, this is simply Krishna's child, and Krishna is putting this living entity in my care. And it is my duty to serve and raise this child, But then sooner or later comes the time where we have to be detached, So there should be not this mood of proprietorship and controllership, but the service mood as being Krishna's instrument. So as we also mentioned previously, ideally, the parents should have a very prayerful mood, always praying, please Krishna, allow me to act as your instrument in giving this little personality, Krishna consciousness, bringing this personality to your divine lotus feet. So, not my child and controlling, but constantly prayerful, mood of service there. Attachment to the service of being parent, rather than we should be attached to the service. Not so much, of course, as Prabhupada said, naturally there is attachment to the child also, of course. The attachment in family life, this is like the glue that bonds the family, So to think that, family life, this is all the deep dark well and there should be no attachment or something, this is the wrong understanding. No, attachment has to be there. But then later on we have to let go. We have to become detached, So in this whole journey, that is so purifying, to go through this journey of serving and giving your heart and soul and being attached, but then having to let go, you know. Yeah, so, but still also the attachment should simply be there to the service also of being a parent and trying to do our best. And eventually allowing the child to exert his free will in detachment without expectations. Again, we can even compare to Sankirtan, you know. Sankirtan devotee is also attached to the service. But the outcome is up to Krishna. You know, we have the saying, we try our best and Krishna does the rest. So very similar in parenting also. You know, we want to be attached to trying our very best and serving as parent, but eventually we have to allow the child to, you know, exert his free will, even if it is not to our liking, you know. And there we allow, we have to cultivate detachment. Krishna allows us also to exert our free will. So that's a good thing to always remember. Ultimately, Krishna is the Supreme Father, you know, and he tells us, if you do like this, you get this result. If you do like that, you get that result. But he allows us to decide, you know, even though he is so pained seeing how the conditioned souls get themselves into trouble again and again and again and again. You know, so same thing is there also as parent, you know, for the up to 16, 17, you know, we have to try our very best, but then we have to allow the child to grow up and decide their own path, you know. Yes. Parents have to learn the art of detached loving and caring, because too much material attachment is debilitating. So if parents are too materially attached, you know, then they can really, just really be too much controlling and not allowing this and not allowing that, and this could happen and that could happen, you know. So too much material attachment is blocking the child's development. You know, sometimes I have come across this too, where parents just don't allow the child to do anything, and because always out of fear or something could happen or something, you know. So this is also not the right mood. So it is all a question of balance, really, you know, like everything in Krishna consciousness. Also, another danger is there of the parents being too ambitious and proud in regards to their children. You know, that the children become almost some way of showing off. Oh, my child is chanting 16 rounds and my child is doing that. And sometimes there's even a whole competition amongst the parents, you know, whose child is the more pure devotee, and of course every parent thinks my child is the purest devotee, and oh my God, you know, and there can be all kinds of tension there amongst the parents and competitiveness and so on. And I remember in this regard, I was once visiting one city in Ukraine, and I was staying with a family, and there also the parents were so ambitious, you know, and I can't remember how old the kid was, but pretty young, you know, maybe 8 or 9 or something. And it was Ekadashi, and the parents were all proud. Oh, my child is fasting on Ekadashi, which children should not even do at all, you know. Children should not fast. But they had this pride. Oh, my child is fasting. And then I caught him going to the cookie box and eating grains, cookies on Ekadashi. You know, I saw it, and I simply thought, oh, poor child, you know, is under so much pressure of the parents, has to fast, but then he's breaking Ekadashi, so better let him eat some nice Ekadashi prasadam, you know, rather than just being so ambitious and forcing things on the child, and then he's even breaking ecology, out of desperation there, Yeah, so I mean, this can really make a lot of damage to the children when the parents are too ambitious and want to show off how advanced the child is, and then the child easily feels this heavy pressure and feels he can never live up to the expectations of the parents and so on, This is not a good idea, It has a real damaging effect on the children. I have seen this also sometimes with children of Prabhupada disciples, that this is burdening a child so much, or it can burden, not always, of course, depending how the children how the parents deal with the child. But if the child feels always this pressure, I'm the child of some, prominent Prabhupada disciples, and everybody looks, and, your father is such and such Prabhu, and yes, and that gives so much pressure on the children that sometimes they cannot handle it, and they just, they have to break out of this pressure and leave Krishna consciousness, Yes, because of these high expectations of everybody, including the children, the parents, So we have to be very careful with that. So, and also, of course, we should praise the child for good behavior. We will get into more details later. And as I mentioned already previously, maybe yesterday, neglected children will always try to draw attention by bad behavior, by interrupting the parents, by simply being crazy and restless, and this is a very clear sign when a child is neglected. I was sharing yesterday the story from Bangladesh where the child was throwing all my stuff around there, because the mother was completely neglecting the child because of her career, Yeah, so we have to be very clear in this, So we have a verse in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 2.1.309. Komaram panchamapdantam pogandam dasamavadi kaishuram e panchadasat yovanam tu tata param. Translation. The Komara stage lasts until the age of 5. The Poganda of up to the age of 10. And Kaishura to age 15. From then on, one is known as Yovana. And Chanakya Pandit gives this formula: for the first 5 years, give lots of love and care to the child. For further 10 years, discipline him. When the child reaches the age of 16, become his friend. That's kind of a simplified overview on these phases. So let's have a quick look here at this chart. So the Komara stage, 0 to 5 years, the psychology of the child is that it is rather self-centered, egocentric, thinks himself to be the object of everyone's love. That's the psychology in a nutshell of that age group. Of course, even more so at the beginning stage, 1, 2, 3 years of age, even more so. So, and what does the child need? Abundant love from parents, especially mother. This will give security to the child. We will discuss it more in detail tomorrow, This is just now an overview, So at that age, we will understand also that the child's intelligence is not enough developed, so the child cannot really understand. The child cannot really be instructed so much or chastised when it is so small, 2, 3 years of age. The child cannot comprehend, really, you know. I mean, in this regard, I remember one story I experienced in Kharkov in Ukraine. There was this family with a young child. Child was only maybe 1.5 or maximum 2, probably not even 2. Could just nicely walk, you know, 1.5, something like that. So, and the parents had gotten a little kitten, a little baby cat, a kitten for the child, you know. But the child just could not understand how to deal with this kitten. And I had my room upstairs there and looking in the yard, and I watched this child. And this child was grabbing the kitten and just hitting it. And the kitten was also so small and also couldn't understand, also didn't have enough intelligence, you know, to understand. So if the cat would have been older, it would have scratched or bitten or run away. But the kitten was just as clumsy and ignorant as the child. So and I was watching this from my window, and I was running down to the parents, begging them, please take this kitten from the child, you know. It's too small. But they didn't really accept this. And they were trying to train the child. But the child was too small when it's 1.5. It cannot understand, you know, that this hurts the kitten and the kitten can die, you know. So this whole game was continuing for quite a while. And the kid again and again was just beating this little kitten, you know. And yeah, I mean, this is what it can easily happen if we don't have a little bit of knowledge of these phases in the child's development, you know, that at such young age you cannot reason with a child, you cannot explain him. He simply doesn't understand. And you definitely cannot chastise the child because it hasn't got the intelligence to understand. And if the child gets severely chastised at such young age, this is very bewildering and traumatizing for a child because it cannot even understand what it actually did wrong, you know. So yeah, so that's why it is helpful, you know, before we become a parent, that we have some little idea here what to do at what stage in life, you know. So then the Poganda stage is from 6 to 10 years. There the child understands that there are others in society and wants to develop relationships, you know. Of course, to some extent, the child also understands this at 4 already and so on, you know. But still, you know, the psychology in that phase is more that it has more developed intelligence and it becomes more socially active, interactive with others and so on, you know. So what the child needs at that stage is the basic skills of socializing and also the basic spiritual practices, you know. Even though we will see tomorrow a little bit of that can also be introduced, of course, when the child is 5 or 4, also gradually in a careful and caring and affectionate way. But then from 6 to 10, there one can give more discipline, you know. So then Kaishora, from 11 to 15, there more and more the attraction for adventure develops, you know, and thrill. Want to do something exciting and do all kinds of stuff. And also gradually attraction to the opposite sex develops due to hormonal changes, you know, gradually, you know, with the girls much earlier than with the boys, you know, so like that. So, and what the child needs at that stage is mainly sense control and discipline. 11 to 15. That's, you know, the main and foremost thing. So, and then Yovanam, 16 or above. There even more, once adventure and go into the world and apply various principles he or she has learned. So that is really the time when the person wants to discover and establish himself in the world and apply different things, experiment, and. We will have a whole section on teenage, so something so important where I feel we are not really offering the teenagers enough in ISKCON, and that's the thing. If we don't offer the teenagers adventures within Krishna consciousness, then they will go outside of Krishna consciousness, very logical, Yes, whole big topic. So at that age or in that phase, the parents should be like friends, That's the time when especially the mother or father, but others it's usually more difficult because they have been so close to the child when the child was younger that for the mothers it's often a real challenge to just take off this I'm the disciplining mother hat, that time is over. And then we have to switch over and be good friend. Otherwise we can really ruin, the relationship with the child and also the child's development, especially with the boys. If the mothers are too dominant and always correcting and instructing and chastising, the boys, they cannot tolerate that, and it really blocks a young man, in his development and in his, ability to really establish himself and be confident and all that, Okay, so I think we just leave it at that for today, and then tomorrow we have some more detailed discussions on these different age groups, and then let's see how far we get. Role of father, role of mother, and if we don't finish it all tomorrow, then we'll simply carry it over to Thursday and we continue there. But also even tomorrow in the discussion, we will keep it more brief and general, because then in lesson 4 and 5, there I'm going more into details of all kinds of important principles of child raising. Okay, so let me see if anybody has some concluding question. Yes, Prabhu.
We have a comment actually from Govindadev Prabhu.
Okay, comment online from Govindadev Prabhu.
It's to the question of Toshani Mataji about how to resolve previous trauma before getting children. I think a very practical way is the way of learning from our and other people's mistakes. Just like we're inclined to surrender to Krishna due to suffering and disappointment in material life, similarly, if we have seen and experienced the negative effects of broken families, we almost naturally should be especially inclined to not put our own children through such turmoil. Bad examples and experiences are not worthless. They serve as a worthless. They serve as a warning and wake-up call.
Yeah, okay, good. Thank you. I mean, yeah, I certainly agree to it, even though to some extent also when people actually have some really bad experiences, they cannot so easily be solved just through the intelligence. This point is also there, that yes, all right, by our intelligence we may understand that we definitely don't want to repeat the same thing and we want to do it better, but this may not be enough if we really carry some deep issues. This is not so easy just with a intelligence and mind to just overcome this. I mean, there are special trauma therapists and so on, who really, take a person back and go through all the different issues and help the person to actually be able to forgive. And I mean, this is not such an easy thing, otherwise we wouldn't need special professionals who are trained in this, I mean, I have met devotees who have really, had all kinds of traumatizing experiences, and that usually it takes a bit more than just the rational understanding and warning of, okay, I'm not going to repeat this or something, would be good. But, I mean, it is true, definitely, it also should be a source of inspiration that we really try to make it better. But, yeah, we may need some help to heal, first. Yes. Okay, we have anything else? Yes, Prabhu. Give him the mic.
You talked about the role of mother and father, and that
please speak in the microphone.
The role of mother and father being interchangeable.
Not being interchangeable.
So, what is? Will you define it later on?
Oh yeah, I mean tomorrow, if you look at the materials, there's a whole section. Role of the father in raising children, so many points, whole big list. And then comes role of the mother in raising children. So, 2 pages of points. We will get there. Yeah. That was just a preview what awaits us in the 3rd section, And as I mentioned, partially they can also overlap, but nevertheless they do have very different moods, because a man has a certain mood and qualities built into his male gross and subtle body, and a mother has very different natures and qualities built into her subtle and gross body. So this is all Krishna's perfect arrangement, because the child needs both moods. Yes. We'll talk about that. Let's hope tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow afternoon or something. We may be busy in the mornings with the different phases there of the child's development, and then maybe tomorrow afternoon or evening. Let's see how far we get. Okay, good. Anything else? No? Okay. So then we'll finish on this note. And thank you so much again for coming, and I hope to see you back tomorrow morning, 7:45. Thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki, Gaura Premanandi.